Hello, everyone. We start today to learn about a sinking sand pool. We have learned before some basic theories of precipitation. Function of grit chamber is to remove the more significant in sewage. Inorganic particulate matter. The main removal object is inorganic large particulate matter. For pumping stations, it is generally located in front of the inverted siphon of the pumping station. Reduce some loads on machinery. There are also some loads and abrasions of pipes, etc., generally set at the front end of the primary sedimentation tank. Reduce the load of sedimentation tank. It can also improve the sludge treatment conditions of treatment structures. This is what the grit chamber does. Second, let's look at the classification of sinking sand ponds. Let's first take a look at the horizontal grit chamber. It is generally used in relatively large sewage treatment plants. First, it seems to us that the composition of advection grit chamber, it can be divided into inflow areas, outflow area, gate, water flow part and grit bucket. The functions of each part have corresponding functions. In the inflow area, the water flow should be uniform, and in the outflow area, the water flow should be stable. Gate, which can be controlled stably. Operating condition of horizontal grit chamber. The water flow part should not be disturbed as much as possible. Prevent precipitated sludge. Sediment is taken away again. Then, effect of horizontal grit chamber. Good grit settling effect. Moreover, the work is relatively stable. The structure is relatively simple. Its design shortcomings. It is that there is a relatively large area. Third, design parameters. Design flow. Generally, you can choose in the following ways. It can be designed according to the maximum design flow. Second, it can also be calculated according to the total flow rate of the water pump unit. Or the third kind, it is designed according to the design flow during rainfall. Horizontal grit chamber. Second, the horizontal flow rate. To ensure that inorganic particles sink. However, organic particles do not sink. This is the design of horizontal velocity of grit chamber. Its maximum flow rate Qmax. Generally, it should be greater than 0.3 meters per second. Qmin, greater than 0.15 meters per second. And stay time, and some design and selection of effective water depth. You can choose reference, some design parameters of horizontal grit chamber. Then, we learn about the second grit chamber, aerated grit chamber. First of all, let's take a look at. Originally, our purpose was to let the sand sink. Why increase aeration? First of all, let's look at the role of aeration. The organic particles in the sewage are often in a suspended state. Then, the sand grains are rubbed against each other. Between sand and sand, some organic substances on the surface are rubbed. It is brought to suspension by aeration bubbles. Then, remove some organic matter from the sand grains. It is beneficial to obtain cleaner sand particles. Its specific structure diagram is as shown in the lower right diagram. Design parameters. Vmax is generally 0.25 to 0.3 meters per second. Horizontal velocity. Generally, you should choose 0.08 to 0.12 meters per second. Residence time of aeration grit chamber. It usually takes 1 to 3 minutes. Effective water depth design. The general design is 2 to 3 meters, not too deep. Width-depth ratio. The ratio of width to depth of water flow is about 1:1.5. And then the ratio of length to width about 5. Let's look at the third and fourth grit chambers. Dole grit chamber and Bell grit chamber. The principles of these two grit chambers are somewhat similar. They all use some centrifugal force. Candole grit chamber. It is a development of advection grit chamber. It relies on gravity dust and sand washing. Then the Bell grit chamber. It is a development of aeration grit chamber. The centrifugal force produced by some mechanical stirring makes the sand fully rub against each other. Remove some organic substances from the sand surface. Achieve a self-cleaning sand. Its construction is shown in the following figure. Differences and similarities between these two grit chambers. The purpose of stable sand settling can be achieved. The third grit chamber, it is a running state of the Bell settling basin. You can see in the figure, water flows in from the middle of the pool. Then, the periphery flows out. His sand settlement is very stable. Let's take a look at the sand discharge method next. There are many forms of sand discharge. Sand can be discharged directly by gravity. It's called multi-bucket type gravity sand discharge, generally used in horizontal grit chamber. No other mechanical force is needed. Other sedimentation tanks, mechanical sand discharge can be adopted. Pump suction sand discharge and grab sand discharge. All kinds of sand discharge methods have corresponding advantages and disadvantages. Like gravity sand discharge, it is easy to be blocked, need to use manual methods, or it can be cleaned by pumping. That mechanical sand discharge, pump sand discharge and other sand discharge, there is a relatively high energy consumption. Its energy consumption is relatively high. Mechanical jamming is easy to occur. This is his pros and cons. This is the sand discharge process of grab sand discharge. You can have a look, its whole operation process. It's fully automated. Sand discharge mode. It is also very intelligent. You can look at the picture. That's the end of our class for today. Thank you all.